I was standing in the hospital hallway when I saw her, my sister Maya, draped in our mother's mink coat, those gaudy gold hoop earrings catching the fluorescent light as she signed the papers to pull my life support. The same hoops I'd saved 3 months of allowance to buy, the ones she'd borrowed and never returned. Through the fog of my dying consciousness, I watched her forge my signature with practiced ease, her French manicured nails, paid for with money she'd stolen from my graduation fund, moving confidently across the DNR form. She's been brain dead for 2 weeks, Maya said to the doctor, her voice dripping with false sorrow. It's what she would have wanted. No extraordinary measures. I wanted to scream that I could hear everything, that the coma was lifting, that I'd just started responding to stimuli that morning. But my body was a prison, and my sister was turning the key to make it my tomb. The doctor hesitated. Are you sure? Her latest scans show. I'm her medical proxy, Maya interrupted, flashing the forged documents she'd created using her boyfriend's legal connections. Our parents are too distraught to make this decision. I'm doing this for the family. For the family, the same excuse she'd used when she stole my college acceptance letter and attended Stanford in my place. The same words she'd whispered when she seduced my fiancé 3 weeks before our wedding. The same justification she'd given when she pushed me down the stairs that put me in this hospital bed. As the machines quieted and my vision darkened, my last thought was of those hoop earrings glinting in the light and how much I'd loved them before she made them symbols of everything she'd taken from me. Then I died, and then I woke up. I was 16 again, sitting at my childhood desk, my phone buzzing with a text from Maya. Can I borrow your new hoop earrings for my date? I'll give them back, promise. My hand trembled as I stared at the screen. The memories of my first life crashed over me like a tsunami. 28 years of systematic abuse, manipulation, and theft, culminating in my murder at age 32. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above my desk. 16-year-old me, with clear skin and hope in my eyes, wearing those same gold hoop earrings that would become a symbol of my sister's parasitic nature. Not this time. I pulled the earrings from my ears and dropped them in my jewelry box, then typed back, "Sorry, they're special to me. I'd rather not lend them out." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again, finally. Wow, selfish much? Mom's right about you. There it was, the beginning of the pattern I hadn't recognized in my first life. Maya's requests weren't requests, they were tests of boundaries followed by punishment when I dared to enforce them. In my previous life, I'd caved within 5 minutes, desperate for approval. She'd never returned those earrings, and it was the first of a babashad, 1,000 small thefts that would eventually escalate to stealing my entire life. I blocked her number and went downstairs to dinner. My family was already seated when I entered the dining room. Dad at the head of the table, barely looking up from his phone. Mom serving Maya's plate first, as always, piling it high with the good pieces of chicken while leaving the scraps for my side. Maya, 17 and glowing with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, smirking at me over her glass of wine. Yes, wine. While I got water because Mom said I was too young, despite being only a year younger. There she is, Mom said, her voice saccharine. We were wondering if you'd bother joining us. I was doing homework, I said, sliding into my seat. On a Friday night? Maya laughed. God, you're such a loser, Arya. In my first life, I'd absorbed these comments like body blows, letting them shape my self-image into something small and worthless. But I'd lived through what came next. I'd watched from my hospital bed as Maya testified at the accidental fall inquest, crying crocodile tears while describing how I'd been so clumsy lately, so distracted. I'd felt my last breath leave my body while she wore my earrings and my identity. Better a loser than a thief, I said calmly, reaching for the salad bowl. The table went silent. Maya's fork clattered against her plate. Excuse me? You heard me. I met her gaze steadily, noting the flash of genuine confusion beneath her manufactured outrage. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who remembered everything. Arya, Mom's voice was sharp. Apologize to your sister right now. For what? Telling the truth? Dad finally looked up from his phone, his expression annoyed. What's gotten into you? Everything, I wanted to say. I know what you all become. I know that in 2 years, Dad will embezzle from his company and use my college fund to pay the legal fees, leaving me with nothing while Maya's Stanford tuition remains untouched. I know that Mom will convince me to put both their names on my first apartment lease, then steal my security deposit to fund Maya's wedding. I know that you'll all stand by and watch as Maya systematically destroys every good thing in my life until there's nothing left to take but my life itself. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Instead, I said, I'm tired of being treated like the family doormat. Things are going to change. Maya's eyes narrowed. You're having some kind of breakdown. Mom, I think she needs therapy. I think you're right, Mom agreed immediately, her hand flying to her pearl necklace, the one I'd later learned she'd bought with money stolen from my grandmother's estate, which should have been split between me and Maya. She's been acting so strange lately. This was the moment I realized where the pattern could shift. In my first life, I'd let them gaslight me into thinking I was crazy, that my perceptions were wrong, that I was the problem. I'd let them isolate me from my friends, convince me I was mentally unstable, and ultimately push me into a dependent state where I had no resources and no allies. Not this time. I'm perfectly fine, I said. I'm just done being taken advantage of. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem. I stood up, leaving my barely touched plate, and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard Maya's incredulous laugh and Mom's worried murmuring. Let them worry, let them wonder what changed. I had 16 years of future knowledge and a score to settle. In my room, I pulled out the journal I'd started that morning, the morning I woke up 16 again. I'd spent the day writing down everything I could remember from my first life. Dates, events, investments, opportunities, and most importantly, every crime my family would commit against me. The journal was my insurance policy, my roadmap, and my evidence file all in one. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, Day 1 of Second Life, established boundaries, refused to lend earrings, refused to accept mistreatment, predicted response, escalation. I wasn't wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, my family launched a coordinated campaign to break me. Mom forgot to do my laundry while meticulously caring for Maya's clothes. Dad didn't have time to drive me to my SAT prep class, but somehow had time to take Maya shopping. Maya started a rumor at school that I was mentally unstable, stealing her things, and making up lies about the family. I endured it all with a smile, because I knew what they didn't. I had the ultimate advantage. I knew the future. I knew that in 3 weeks, our neighbor Mrs. Chen would mention that her nephew was looking for a part-time assistant for his startup. In my first life, Maya had taken that job, leveraged it into a full-time position after graduation, and eventually married the nephew, my fiancé, David. This time, I'd already sent Ms. Chen a resume and a batch of her favorite almond cookies. The job was mine. I knew that in 2 months, Dad's company would announce a new project that would triple its stock value before the embezzlement scandal hit. I'd already opened a secret trading account using birthday money from my maternal grandmother, the grandmother Mom had systematically isolated me from by intercepting her calls and letters. This time, I'd called her myself, reconnected, and she'd been overjoyed to hear from me. I knew that in 6 months, Maya would accidentally destroy my science fair project the night before the competition, a project that would have won me a full scholarship in my first life if it had been allowed to compete. This time, I was documenting everything, keeping duplicate materials at a friend's house, installing a hidden camera in my room, building an evidence file that would be unshakable. But most importantly, I knew exactly what I needed to become untouchable: money, power, and allies. And I knew exactly where to find all three. My maternal grandmother, Dorothy Chen, was a woman my mother had taught me to fear in my first life. She's manipulative, Mom had said. She never approved of me marrying your father. She'll try to turn you against us. I'd believed her, avoiding grandmother's calls and visits, watching from my window as she left gifts on the porch that Mom would immediately donate. In reality, as I'd discovered too late in my first life, Dorothy was a real estate mogul worth $40 million who'd been trying desperately to protect me from my family's dysfunction. She'd seen through my mother's narcissism and my sister's sociopathy from the beginning. In my first life, she'd died of a heart attack when I was 19, leaving her entire fortune to an animal shelter because I'd refused to have a relationship with her. This time, I called her the day after the dinner confrontation. "Arya?" Her voice was surprised but warm. "Sweetheart, is that really you?" "Hi, grandmother. I'm sorry I haven't called before. I'd like to see you if that's okay." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I've been waiting 16 years to hear you say that. When can you come?" "How about tomorrow? I can take the bus to—" "Nonsense. I'll send my driver." "And Arya, don't tell your mother, not yet." She understood. Of course she did. She'd been watching this dysfunction play out for years, powerless to intervene while I was a willing participant in my own victimization. The next day, a sleek black car picked me up 2 blocks from school. The driver, a kind elderly man named Robert, made small talk about the weather while I watched my neighborhood fade into the rearview mirror. Grandmother lived in the prestigious Riverside district in a penthouse I'd only seen in magazines. She was waiting when the elevator opened directly into her foyer. 74 years old, elegant in tailored slacks and a silk blouse, her silver hair in a perfect chignon. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes sharp and assessing, then opened her arms. I fell into them and cried. I cried for the grandmother I'd never known in my first life. I cried for the 16-year-old I'd been, so desperate for love that I'd accepted crumbs from people who saw me as a resource to exploit. I cried for the 32-year-old I'd become, dying alone while wearing a hospital gown, everything I'd ever owned already divided up among the people who'd killed me. There, grandmother murmured, stroking my hair. "You're safe now. Tell me everything." So I did. Not the truth about Rebirth, she'd think I was crazy, but everything else. The favoritism, the theft, the manipulation, the constant gaslighting. The way Maya took everything I owned and Mom encouraged it. The way Dad checked out emotionally, too wrapped up in his own problems to notice one daughter was cannibalizing the other. Grandmother listened without interruption, her expression growing stormier with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I tried to warn your mother when she was pregnant with you," she finally said. "I saw how she favored Maya, even in utero, talking about how she hoped you'd be easier than your sister, how she didn't know if she could handle 2 difficult children. But Maya wasn't difficult. Maya learned early that tears and tantrums got her everything she wanted, so she became more demanding. And your mother rewarded it." "Why did Mom turn out this way?" I asked. "You seem so different." Grandmother smiled sadly. "Your mother was my husband's favorite. He spoiled her rotten, never held her accountable, and when he died, she expected the world to continue treating her as special. When it didn't, she became bitter. Then she had Maya, and she saw a chance to create another special person to validate her worldview. You were the scapegoat before you were born." It hurt to hear, but it also freed something in me. This wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed to earn their love. They'd never intended to give it. "I want to help you," Grandmother continued, "but I need to know you're serious. Are you ready to fight for yourself? Really fight, even if it means losing them?" I thought about Maya's hand signing my death warrant, about Mom pawning my grandmother's jewelry that should have been my inheritance to pay for Maya's destination wedding, about Dad testifying in court that I'd always been unstable and jealous of my sister, sealing the verdict that my death was an accident. "I lost them a long time ago," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." "Good." Grandmother's smile was fierce. "Then let's teach them what happens when you underestimate a Chen woman." Over the next 6 months, my life transformed in ways that must have seemed miraculous to anyone who didn't know the future. The part-time job with Ms. Chen's nephew turned into a key position at a tech startup that I knew would be acquired by Google in 3 years. I invested every penny I earned into stocks I knew would soar, building a nest egg that would become untouchable by my family. Grandmother became my advisor, my mentor, and my ally. She taught me about contracts, about protection, about building wealth and power. She introduced me to her lawyer, who helped me open accounts in my name only, establish a paper trail of my earnings, and document every instance of my family's financial abuse. Most importantly, she taught me about diamonds. Gold is lovely, she said one day, examining the hoop earrings I'd refused to lend Maya, the earrings that had started this war as but it's soft, easy to bend, to break, to steal. Diamonds, though, diamonds are forever. They can't be broken, can't be diminished. And if you choose the right ones, they become markers of something your sister can never touch. Genuine accomplishment. She took me to an exclusive jeweler and had a pair of diamond studs. Custom made. Simple, elegant, and worth more than my parents' car. But their real value wasn't monetary, it was symbolic. "These are yours," grandmother said as the jeweler placed them in a velvet box. "Earned by your work, paid for by your money, and too valuable for casual lending. When your sister asks, and she will, you can tell her these aren't for borrowing. These are diamonds, not gold. They represent something she's never understood, the difference between taking and earning." I wore them home that day, feeling their weight in my ears. Solid, real, untouchable. Maya noticed immediately. "Nice earrings," she said at dinner, her voice casual but her eyes calculating. "New boyfriend buying you presents?" "I bought them myself," I said, with money I earned. "From that little secretary job?" She laughed. "Those must be cubic zirconia." "They're real," I said calmly. 2 carats each. And before you ask, no, you can't borrow them. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Arya, that's rude. If Maya wants to borrow, they cost $12,000, I interrupted. "Would you feel comfortable lending out something that valuable?" The table went silent. Dad looked up from his phone for the first time in weeks, his expression startled. Maya's face cycled through disbelief, envy, and finally anger. "You're lying," she said flatly. I pulled out my phone and showed her the receipt along with the insurance policy. Maya's face went white, then red. Where did you, she sputtered, unable to complete a sentence. "I worked for it," I said simply. "Adambis, that's what people do when they want nice things. They earn them." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mom's voice was sharp. "It means I'm tired of funding Maya's lifestyle while being told I'm selfish for wanting to keep my own things." I looked directly at my sister. "You've borrowed my clothes, my jewelry, my school supplies, my electronics, and never returned any of it. You've stolen money from my wallet, used my credit card without permission, and forged my signature on documents. That ends now." "Those are serious accusations," Dad said, finally showing signs of life. "Do you have proof?" I pulled out my phone again and opened a folder I'd labeled Evidence. Screenshots of Maya's Depop account selling my clothes, security footage from the mall showing her using my credit card, a recording from the hidden camera in my room showing her going through my wallet. The silence that followed was deafening. "You've been spying on your own sister?" Mom's voice was horrified, but I noted she wasn't denying the theft. "I've been documenting a pattern of theft and abuse," I corrected. "And before you accuse me of being paranoid, ask yourself why I felt the need to install security cameras in my own bedroom." Maya's chair scraped back violently. "This is insane. You're insane. I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "No, you don't," I agreed, Aditi. "But you do have to. Return everything you've stolen, or I'll be filing a police report." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. In my first life, I'd been so desperate for family approval that I'd let them walk all over me until there was nothing left. This version of me was foreign to her, confident, prepared, and completely done with her bullshit. "You wouldn't," she breathed. "Try me." She didn't. Over the next week, items started appearing outside my bedroom door, clothes with tags still on them, my old iPod scratched and battery dead but returned, jewelry, books, even the gold hoop earrings tarnished from years of wear. Each return felt like a small victory, but I knew the real war was just beginning. Maya was used to winning. She wouldn't accept this defeat quietly. The escalation started subtly. Maya began a whisper campaign at school telling anyone who would listen that I'd become obsessed with money, that I was accusing her of theft because I was jealous, that our grandmother was poisoning me against the family. Some people believed her. Maya had always been popular, charismatic, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. But I had something she didn't: the truth and the receipts to back it up. When she told her best friend Sophie that I was making up stories, I showed Sophie the security footage. When she told her boyfriend Jake that I was mentally unstable, I showed him the evidence of her selling my clothes online. One by one, I cut through her lies with documentation, watching her social circle shrink as people realized the Golden Girl had a rotten core. Mom tried a different approach: weaponized therapy. "We're all going to family counseling," she announced one Sunday morning. "Your father and I are concerned about the conflict between you and Maya, and we think professional help would benefit everyone." I agreed immediately, which seemed to surprise her. She'd expected resistance, but I knew what she didn't. Therapy only works if everyone is honest, and I had no intention of hiding the truth. Our therapist, Dr. Miranda Rodriguez, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd built her practice on family dynamics. In our first session, Mom painted a picture of two sisters, Juan, who'd grown apart, with me becoming increasingly hostile and paranoid while poor Maya tried desperately to maintain their bond. "Arya has always been jealous of Maya," Mom said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "Maya is more outgoing, more accomplished. I think Arya has trouble accepting that she's not the center of attention." "That's interesting," Dr. Rodriguez said, making notes. "Arya, how do you respond to that?" "I think my mother is projecting," I said calmly. "She's the one who can't accept that she has two daughters with different strengths. She's chosen a favorite, and it's not me." "That's not true," Mom protested. "I love both my daughters equally." "Then why did you spend $5,000 on Maya's prom dress, but told me I couldn't go to prom because we couldn't afford it?" Mom's mouth opened and closed. That's not... Maya needed that dress for what? To outshine everyone else? To maintain her image? I pulled out my phone and showed Dr. Rodriguez the bank statements I'd obtained from Dad's carelessly left open laptop. Statements showing years of unequal spending, all favoring Maya. This is a pattern of financial favoritism that's been ongoing since I was born. Dr. Rodriguez studied the statements, her expression carefully neutral. "These are concerning numbers. Mrs. Chen, can you explain this discrepancy?" "Maya has more social obligations," Mom said defensively. "She's popular. She has lots of friends. She needs..." "And I don't need anything," I interrupted. "I don't need school supplies or a laptop that works or clothes without holes. Maya got a new car for her 16th birthday. I got a card." "You're not old enough to drive," Mom snapped. "I turned 16 3 months before Maya turned 17. The car was a birthday present. You gave her a car on my birthday because you couldn't wait 2 more months." The session devolved from there, with Mom making excuses and Maya crying about how mean I was being, while Dad sat silently, scrolling through his phone. Dr. Rodriguez watched it all with the clinical interest of someone witnessing a textbook case of scapegoat golden child dynamics. At the end, she asked to see me alone. "Arya," she said once my family had left the room, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you safe at home?" "Physically, yes. Emotionally and financially, no." She nodded slowly. "What you've described is systematic emotional abuse and financial exploitation. These patterns don't usually resolve themselves, especially when the family system has been organized around them for so long. Do you have support outside the home?" "My grandmother," I said. "She's helping me." "Good. Keep building that relationship." "And Arya?" She looked at me seriously. "Document everything. I can see you've already started, but keep going. If things escalate, you'll need proof." "Things are going to escalate," I said. "I can feel it." I was right. The incident happened 3 weeks later, on the night of Maya's graduation party. Mom had been planning it for months. A backyard extravaganza with catering, a DJ, and a guest list that included half the senior class plus family friends who hadn't seen us in years. It was a celebration of Maya's acceptance to Stanford, her perfect GPA, her bright future. No one mentioned that Stanford had been my dream school or that my grades were actually higher than Maya's. No one mentioned that in my first life, Maya had stolen my acceptance letter from the mailbox, destroyed it, and submitted her own application using my transcripts and essay. This time, I'd seen it coming. I'd submitted my application from a P.O. box Maya didn't know about, changed all my passwords, and waited. The acceptance letter had arrived 2 weeks ago. I'd gotten in, full scholarship. Maya had been rejected. She didn't know that yet. In her mind, she was still the golden child, destined for Stanford while I went to community college. She'd even told people at the party that she felt bad for me, that she wished I was smart enough to follow in her footsteps. I was going to enjoy this. I waited until the party was in full swing, until Mom had given her toast about her brilliant daughter, and all the guests were mingling with champagne. Then I stood up, tapped my glass, and smiled. "I have an announcement," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. "I wanted to share some good news with everyone here since we're celebrating academic achievement." Mom's smile was frozen on her face. Maya looked confused, then wary. "I got into Stanford," I said, pulling the acceptance letter from my purse. "Full scholarship, including room and board. I start in the fall." The silence was absolute. Then someone started clapping. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart. Others joined in, a smattering of applause that grew as people processed what I'd said. But I was watching my family. Mom's face had gone chalk white. Dad actually looked up from his phone, his expression stunned. And Maya looked like I'd slapped her. "That's impossible," she said, her voice too loud. "You didn't even apply." "I did, actually. I just didn't tell you." I smiled sweetly. "I kept it private because I didn't want anyone to interfere." The implication hung in the air. Several people who knew our family dynamics looked uncomfortable. Maya's face went from white to red. "Well, congratulations to both my daughters," Mom said, her voice brittle. "Maya was also accepted to Stanford, of course. It'll be wonderful for them to be together." "Actually," I said, still smiling, "Maya wasn't accepted. I checked the Stanford portal last week, using the account information she carelessly left open on the family computer. Her application was rejected due to discrepancies in her academic record." The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Maya stood frozen, her mouth open in shock. Mom looked like she might be sick. "That's a lie," Maya shouted. "You're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and projected the Stanford admissions portal onto the TV screen Dad had set up for the party slideshow. There it was, in black and white. Maya Chen. Application status denied. "I don't understand," Mom said faintly. "Maya had perfect grades, perfect test scores." "No," I said quietly. "I had perfect grades and perfect test scores. Maya had good grades that she enhanced by copying my homework, stealing my papers, and in one memorable case, breaking into my locker to photograph my chemistry final." "You can't prove that," Maya hissed. "Actually, I can." I changed the projection to show security footage I'd obtained through a friend who worked in the school IT department. Footage showing Maya breaking into my locker multiple times over the past 2 years. "I've been documenting everything, Maya. Every theft, every lie, every time you sabotage me to make yourself look better. I have years of evidence." "Why?" The word came from Dad, surprisingly. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Why would you do this here, in front of everyone?" "Because you never would have believed me otherwise," I said simply. "You've spent my entire life choosing Maya over me, funding her dreams while ignoring mine, allowing her to steal from me with no consequences." I tried to address it privately, but Mom scheduled this party as a celebration of Maya's acceptance to Stanford, an acceptance that was never going to happen because she's not qualified. I had to set the record straight. "Get out," Mom said, her voice shaking. Get out of this house. You're not welcome here. Gladly, I picked up my purse, which I'd pre-packed with essentials. I'll be staying with grandmother from now on. My lawyer will be in touch about recovering the money you've stolen from my accounts over the years. Your lawyer? Dad finally looked concerned. Arya, you don't need a lawyer. We're family. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't sabotage. Family doesn't push each other downstairs and then lie about it. Maya went pale. She hadn't thought I remembered that. The accident from 2 weeks ago that had left me with a sprained ankle and her with an alibi about how I'd tripped. I'd installed cameras everywhere after that, capturing the truth about what really happened. I walked out of that party with my head high, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I could hear Maya crying, Mom making excuses, and guests murmuring in shocked tones. Let them talk. Let them know what kind of people my family really were. Grandmother's driver was waiting for me at the end of the street. How did it go? Robert asked, smiling at me in the rearview mirror. Perfectly, I said, settling into the leather seat. Phase 1 complete. The fallout was spectacular. Within 24 hours, half the people at the party had posted about what happened on social media. The story spread through our community like wildfire. The golden child who'd been stealing from her sister, the parents who enabled it, the scapegoat daughter who'd finally fought back. Opinions were divided. Some people thought I was cruel for exposing Maya publicly, while others applauded me for standing up for myself. I didn't care about the court of public opinion. I cared about the court of law. My lawyer, Jeremy Liu, was a bulldog in an expensive suit. Grandmother had hired him specifically to deal with my parents, and he approached the case with the enthusiasm of a man who'd been waiting his whole career to nail someone for financial abuse of a minor. This is actually an incredibly strong case, he said during our first meeting, spreading out documents across his conference table. You're a minor, they're your parents, and they have a legal obligation to provide for you equitably. The evidence shows a clear pattern of discriminatory treatment that rises to the level of financial abuse. Can we get my college fund back? I asked. In my first life, Dad had embezzled from his company in 6 months and used my college fund, $20,000 my maternal grandfather had left me, to pay for his legal defense. The fund was currently intact, but I knew what was coming. We can freeze the account, Jeremy said. Put it in a trust that only you can access at 18. We can also pursue damages for the items Maya stole and never returned, the money your parents spent inequitably on Maya versus you, and the emotional distress caused by the systematic abuse. I don't want money, I said. I want protection. I want them to never be able to touch anything I earn or inherit again. That we can definitely do. The lawsuit was filed 2 days later. It named both parents and Maya as defendants, citing financial abuse, emotional abuse, theft, and fraud. The local news picked it up because it was sensational. Teen sues entire family, golden child dynasty crumbles, justice for the scapegoat. My family's response was predictable. They hired their own lawyer, a slick corporate type who specialized in making problems go away quietly. He reached out to Jeremy with a settlement offer. I dropped the lawsuit. They agreed to pay for my college. Everyone moves on. I refused. This isn't about money, I told Jeremy. It's about justice. I want this on record. I want every future college employer and partner they encounter to be able to Google them and see exactly who they are. Jeremy grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. The case went to court 3 months later. It was a civil trial, not criminal, but the evidence was damning enough that the local prosecutor had opened a criminal investigation into Maya's theft and fraud. My family sat on one side of the courtroom, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen them. I sat on the other side, flanked by grandmother and Jeremy, wearing a crisp suit and my diamond earrings. The trial lasted 2 days. Jeremy presented evidence methodically. Financial records showing the spending disparity, security footage of Maya's thefts, testimony from teachers and counselors who'd witnessed the family dynamics, expert witnesses who explained the long-term psychological damage of scapegoating. My family's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive child who was exaggerating normal sibling rivalry. But then Jeremy put me on the stand. Arya, he said gently, please tell the court about the incident on March 15th of this year. I took a deep breath and described the day Maya pushed me down the stairs, how she'd been angry about my Stanford acceptance, How she'd waited until we were alone, then shoved me hard enough that I'd tumbled down 12 steps. How I'd lain at the bottom with a sprained ankle and bruised ribs while she stood at the top, telling me that if I told anyone it was anything but an accident, she'd make sure I never got into Stanford after all. "Did you report this incident?" Jeremy asked. "No, I was afraid no one would believe me. Maya has always been the golden child, the favored daughter. I'd spent my entire life being told I was jealous, paranoid, making things up. I thought if I reported it, they'd find a way to make it my fault." "Do you have proof of this incident?" "I do." I nodded toward the screen where Jeremy projected the security camera footage I'd installed in the stairwell the week before, anticipating this exact scenario based on my previous life's memories. The video was damning. Crystal clear footage of Maya deliberately pushing me, then carefully arranging her face into concern before calling for Mom. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order. My mother was crying, Dad looked gray, and Maya looked terrified. "Your Honor," their lawyer said, standing quickly, "we'd like to request a recess to discuss a settlement." The settlement came 24 hours later. My parents agreed to transfer my college fund into an irrevocable trust in my name, pay damages of $50,000 for emotional distress, transfer ownership of the car they'd given Maya on my birthday to me, relinquish any claim to my future earnings or inheritance, attend family therapy for a minimum of 2 years, issue a formal apology to be read in court. Maya faced criminal charges for assault and theft. She pled guilty in exchange for probation, community service, and a permanent criminal record. Stanford formally rescinded her acceptance when they learned about the fraud in her application. I stood in the courtroom and listened to Mom read the apology the lawyer had written, her voice mechanical and empty of real remorse. I watched Dad sign away his rights to control my finances, his hand shaking slightly. I looked Maya in the eye as the judge sentenced her to 300 hours of community service and 2 years of probation. I felt nothing but satisfaction. Life after the trial was surreal. I moved in with grandmother permanently, and her penthouse became my sanctuary. She taught me about business, about investing, about building the kind of wealth that created generational security. I spent my days working at the startup, taking online courses, and preparing for Stanford. My family didn't reach out, not once. They'd been thoroughly humiliated, exposed in front of their community, and had no desire to face me, which was exactly what I wanted. But I wasn't done. You see, I knew something they didn't. I knew that in 3 months, Dad's company was going to announce an internal investigation into financial irregularities. In my first life, this had been the beginning of his embezzlement scandal. He'd been stealing from the company for years, using creative accounting to hide it, and had gotten desperate when an audit was announced. That's when he'd raided my college fund, money that wasn't his to take, to cover his tracks. This time, I'd already reported the irregularities anonymously to the company's board of directors. I'd sent them copies of the documents I'd photographed from Dad's home office. Documents he'd been careless with because he never thought his scapegoat daughter would be smart enough or bold enough to turn against him. The investigation launched quietly. Dad didn't see it coming until it was too late. I was having tea with grandmother when we saw the news. Local CFO arrested for embezzlement. There was Dad's photo, being led out of his office in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. The article detailed how he'd stolen over $2 million from his company over 5 years, using it to fund Maya's lavish lifestyle and Mom's shopping addiction. "Did you know about this?" Grandmother asked me, her voice careful. "I suspected," I said honestly. "I found some documents that didn't add up. I reported them to the company." "You turned in your own father." "He stole from me first," I said simply. "He was planning to steal my college fund to pay for legal fees when this came out. I just made sure it came out before he could destroy my future along with his own." Grandmother studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You're more like me than I thought. Ruthless when necessary, but always justified." "I learned from the best," I said, raising my teacup in a toast. Dad's trial was quick. With the evidence I'd provided, plus testimony from his coworkers, the verdict was never in doubt, guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, ordered to pay back the stolen money plus damages, and lost his professional license permanently. Mom filed for divorce 3 days after the sentencing, not out of moral outrage, but because Dad's criminal record would make her a social pariah. She tried to get a favorable settlement, but Dad had no assets left. Everything had been seized to pay restitution. She ended up with the house, which was underwater on its mortgage, and a car that was being repossessed. Maya dropped out of community college after one semester, unable to handle the social stigma of being the girl who'd stolen from her sister and framed her for falling downstairs. She got a job at a retail store, lost it for stealing from the register, and last I heard was living with a boyfriend who treated her the way she treated me, as a resource to be exploited. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't my doing, it was the natural consequence of their choices. I'd simply accelerated the timeline and ensured I wasn't collateral damage. Stanford was everything I'd dreamed it would be. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in computer science with a minor in business. The startup I'd been working for was acquired by Google during my freshman year, and my stock options were suddenly worth six figures. I invested it wisely, building on the foundation grandmother had taught me. I made friends, real friends, who liked me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. I dated people who treated me with respect. I joined clubs, traveled during breaks, and experienced all the things I'd missed in my first life when I'd been too busy trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. But I never forgot where I came from. I kept the gold hoop earrings Maya had stolen and returned, tarnished and damaged. I kept them in a small box on my desk, a reminder of who I'd been and what I'd survived. Next to them sat the diamond studs grandmother had given me, sparkling and perfect, a reminder of who I'd become. In my junior year, I started a nonprofit organization for young people escaping abusive family situations. We provided legal assistance, financial literacy education, and emergency housing. We helped kids who were where I'd been, trapped in systems designed to exploit them, told they were worthless, starved for the approval of people who would never give it. The organization grew quickly. Grandmother donated the seed money, but within a year we had corporate sponsors and foundation grants. We helped hundreds of kids escape, rebuild, and thrive. Each success story felt like a vindication, proof that the cycle could be broken if someone just gave you the tools and the belief that you deserved better. One day during my senior year, I got a letter forwarded from the nonprofit's office. The return address made my hands shake. It was from Maya. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won out. Dear Arya, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your time or attention, but I needed to write this, even if you never read it. I'm sorry. Not the performative sorry Mom made me say in court, but real sorry. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. For stealing your things, your opportunities, your life. For pushing you down the stairs. For standing by and watching while Mom and Dad treated you like you didn't matter. I've spent the last 4 years in therapy trying to understand why I did what I did. My therapist says I learned early that love was conditional, that I had to be perfect to be worthy, and that making you look worse made me look better by comparison. She says I saw you as competition rather than family. She's right, but that's not an excuse. I was old enough to know better, and I chose cruelty anyway. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I see what I did now. I see how I could have killed you when I pushed you down those stairs. I see how close I came to destroying everything good in your life, the way I destroyed everything good in my own. I'm working a minimum wage job. I'm in a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood. I have no prospects and no real friends. This is what I deserve. But you're doing amazing things. I've followed your nonprofit online. You're helping people like us, people who were hurt by their families. You're making the world better. I'm glad you got out. I'm glad you found grandmother. I'm glad you fought back. I'm sorry I made fighting back necessary. Maya. I read the letter 3 times trying to feel something. Forgiveness, anger, satisfaction. But all I felt was tired. Maya's apology, however genuine, didn't change what she'd done. It didn't undo the years of abuse or the murder that had ended my first life. But it also didn't matter anymore. Maya's opinion of me, her regrets, her growth, none of it affected my life now. I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of what she'd tried to destroy. Her guilt was her burden to carry, not mine. I filed the letter away in a folder labeled closure and never responded. Some people didn't deserve a reply. Some apologies came too late to matter. I had better things to do with my time. I graduated Stanford summa cum laude with job offers from 3 major tech companies. I chose Google, the company that had acquired my startup, and negotiated a compensation package that included a 6-figure salary, stock options, and a signing bonus that I immediately invested. Grandmother attended my graduation, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage. Afterward, at the celebration dinner she'd organized at her favorite restaurant, she presented me with a small velvet box. "Open it," she said, her eyes twinkling. Inside was a stunning pair of diamond and sapphire earrings, custom designed, worth more than most people's cars. They were exquisite. Blue stones that matched my eyes, surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like stars. "These are grandmother's gift," she said. "But more importantly, they're a reminder. You started with gold that could be bent and stolen. You moved to diamonds that couldn't be broken. Now you have sapphires, precious, rare, and uniquely yours. No one can take them because no one else is you." I put them on right there at the table, feeling their weight in my ears. They were heavier than the diamond studs, heavier than the gold hoops. They felt like victory. "Thank you," I said, hugging her tightly, "for everything, for believing in me, for teaching me, for being the family I deserved." "You taught yourself, darling," she said, patting my cheek. "I just gave you the tools. You did the work." That night, I looked at myself in the mirror of my new apartment, a luxury 1-bedroom in Silicon Valley with a view of the bay. I wore the sapphire earrings, a designer dress I'd bought myself, and a smile of genuine happiness. I thought about the girl I'd been at 16, wearing cheap gold hoops and desperately seeking approval from people who saw her as disposable. I thought about the woman I'd become at 32 in my first life, dying alone in a hospital bed while her murderer wore those same hoops. And I thought about the woman I was now at 22, with a Stanford degree, a lucrative job, a thriving nonprofit, and a future full of possibilities. Maya had worn my gold hoops because taking what was mine made her feel powerful. I wore sapphires and diamonds because I'd earned them, and that made all the difference. Years passed. I rose through the ranks at Google, eventually becoming a senior director. My nonprofit expanded to multiple cities, helping thousands of young people escape abusive situations. I dated, fell in love, got married to a kind man who'd also overcome a difficult childhood. We built a life together based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the understanding that family is what you choose, not what you're born into. Grandmother lived to see me turn 30, healthy and vibrant until the end. She died peacefully in her sleep, leaving me her entire estate with a note that said, "You were always the granddaughter I dreamed of. Use this to build something beautiful." I did. I used her money to establish a foundation in her name, funding scholarships for students from abusive homes, legal aid for those escaping family exploitation, and research into breaking cycles of intergenerational trauma. On my 32nd birthday, the age I'd been when I died in my first life, I stood on the balcony of my home in San Francisco, a glass of champagne in my hand, wearing sapphire earrings and a smile. My husband was inside, making dinner. My stepchildren were doing homework at the kitchen table. My nonprofit had just opened its 20th location. I was alive. I was happy. I was free. And somewhere out there, Maya was still wearing knockoff gold hoops and wondering why her life had gone so wrong. I raised my glass to the setting sun and whispered a toast. To second chances, to fighting back, to diamonds over gold. The universe had given me the ultimate do-over, and I'd made the most of it, not through revenge, but through justice. Not through cruelty, but through boundaries. Not by becoming like them, but by becoming better than they ever could have imagined. Maya had worn my hoop earrings, thinking she could wear my identity. But after my rebirth, I'd switched to diamonds she couldn't touch, sapphires she couldn't comprehend, and a life she couldn't steal. And that was the sweetest victory of all. The final chapter of this story came 5 years later, when I was 37. I'd been invited to speak at Stanford about entrepreneurship and resilience. As I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of young faces, I saw someone in the back row who made my heart stop. Maya. She was 40 now, looking older than her years. Her clothes were discount store quality, her hair showing gray she hadn't bothered to dye. She sat alone while people around her chatted with friends and colleagues. After my speech, which was very well received, she approached me hesitantly. "Arya," she said, "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." "I remember everything," I said simply. "I know, I wanted to see you, to see what you'd become." She looked around at the prestigious venue, the important people wanting to talk to me, the life I'd built. "You did it. You actually did it." "Did what?" "Became more than what they said you could be. More than what I tried to make you." Her eyes were wet. "I work in the admissions office here now. Part-time, clerical work. I see students like you were brilliant, hardworking, from difficult situations. And I try to help them. It's not much, but it's something." I studied her for a long moment. She looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely changed. But I also knew that change didn't erase history. "I'm glad you're trying to do better," I said finally. "I hope you keep at it." "That's it? That's all you have to say to me?" "What do you want me to say, Maya? That I forgive you? That we can be sisters again?" I shook my head. "You killed me in another life. You tried to destroy me in this one. The fact that you failed doesn't make us family." "I know," she whispered. I just, I'm proud of you." "If that means anything." "It doesn't," I said honestly. "Your pride or lack thereof has no impact on my life. I didn't do any of this for you or to spite you or to prove you wrong. I did it for me." She nodded, tears spilling over. "Can I ask you something? Those earrings," she gestured to the sapphires I wore, "do they mean something? You always wear such beautiful earrings now." I smiled, touching one of the stones. "They mean I learned the difference between gold and diamonds, between things that can be taken and things that are earned, between who people say I am and who I actually am." "I used to think the gold hoops made me beautiful," Maya said softly. "But they were just hoops. You're the one who became beautiful inside and out." "Yes," I agreed, "I did." I walked away from her then, back to my life, my success, my happiness. I didn't look back to see if she was crying or if she stayed for the rest of the event. It didn't matter. She'd worn my hoop earrings and thought she'd won. But I'd switched to diamonds, then sapphires, then built an empire. And in the end, that was the story that mattered. On my 40th birthday, I stood in front of a mirror in my walk-in closet, preparing for the celebration my husband had planned. I had a collection of earrings now, dozens of pairs, each representing a milestone, a victory, a moment of joy. Diamonds for my graduation, emeralds for my wedding, rubies for my nonprofit's 10th anniversary, pearls for my children's births. But in a small box on the top shelf, I still kept those tarnished gold hoops Maya had returned. I took them down and held them in my palm, remembering the girl who'd bought them with 3 months of allowance, hoping they'd make her feel special. They were small, cheap, ordinary, and they'd taught me the most important lesson of my life. Never let anyone make you feel like you're only worth gold when you're actually diamonds. I put them back in their box, closed the closet, and went downstairs to celebrate with people who loved me, truly loved me, not for what I could give them, but for who I was. And as I laughed and danced and lived, I wore sapphires that caught the light like promises, reminding me that second chances are precious, that fighting back is sacred, and that becoming someone your past self would be proud of is the best revenge of all. Maya wore my hoop earrings, but I became a diamond she could never touch, and I lived happily ever after.